My name is Bobby, and I'm 54 years old. Right now I'm sitting in my kitchen, staring at a torn wedding invitation on my table. The elegant script that once promised joy now feels like a mockery. You know, there are moments in motherhood when you have to make decisions that nobody else will understand. Decisions that might make you look like the villain, but deep down, you know they're necessary. Sometimes protecting the people you love means doing the unthinkable, even when it breaks your own heart. I raised my son Marcus alone after my divorce, working 2 jobs and sacrificing everything I had to give him a better future. But 3 weeks ago, he called me and said 5 words that shattered my world completely. Before I tell you what happened next, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories from everyday life. Now let me tell you about the day I had to choose between staying silent or saving my son's future. Let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how we got to that devastating phone call. My son Marcus is 28 years old and works as a software engineer in Austin, Texas. He's brilliant, kind, and everything a mother could hope for in a child. After his father left, when Marcus was just 7, I became his whole world, and he became mine. Those were the hardest years of my life. I worked as an accounting clerk during the day and waited tables at a local diner every evening. Some nights I'd come home so exhausted I could barely stand, but I'd still help Marcus with his homework at our tiny kitchen table. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house in San Antonio, and every penny went toward his education and future. When Marcus graduated high school with a full scholarship to the University of Texas, I cried for hours, not just from pride, but from relief. I had actually done it. I had given my son the opportunities his father never bothered to provide. I even sold our little house to help pay for his remaining college expenses, moving into a smaller apartment so he could focus on his studies without worrying about money. Marcus thrived in college and landed a great job right after graduation. For years we talked almost every day. He'd call to tell me about his work, his friends, his life. We had Sunday dinners together whenever possible, and he never failed to thank me for everything I'd sacrificed. Our relationship was the one thing I was most proud of in my entire life. Then 2 years ago, everything started to change. Marcus began dating Hayley, a 26-year-old marketing executive he'd met through work. The first time he brought her to dinner, I tried my best to be welcoming and kind. Hayley was undeniably beautiful, with long blonde hair and striking green eyes. She had a confidence that filled the room, but something about her made me uncomfortable from the very first meeting. During that dinner, I noticed how she constantly checked her phone, even when Marcus was talking directly to her. Her responses seemed rehearsed, like she was playing a role rather than being genuine. When Marcus told funny stories about his childhood, she'd laugh at all the wrong moments, as if she wasn't really listening. Most troubling was the way she'd look at me with barely concealed impatience whenever I spoke. Over the following months, Marcus began changing in ways that worried me deeply. Our daily phone calls became weekly, then sporadic. When I'd ask about his life, his answers grew shorter and more distant. He started declining our traditional family gatherings, always with excuses about Hayley's social commitments or work obligations. The few times I did see them together, I watched my warm, communicative son become guarded and tense. Hayley would make subtle comments about his clothes, his apartment, even his job, all disguised as helpful suggestions. I saw how he'd glance at her nervously before answering even simple questions, as if seeking permission to speak freely. My motherly instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but every time I tried to express my concerns, Marcus would defend Hayley and change the subject. I could see him slipping away from me, becoming someone I barely recognized, but I felt powerless to stop it. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Marcus called one evening and announced in a voice devoid of his usual warmth that he and Hayley were engaged. Instead of excitement or joy, his tone was flat, almost businesslike. When I asked about wedding plans, he gave vague responses and quickly ended the conversation. That was the moment I knew our relationship had fundamentally shifted, and I feared I was losing my son forever. It was a cool October evening, and I was preparing dinner in my small kitchen when the phone rang. I expected it to be Marcus with his usual weekly check-in call, so I answered with my typical cheerful greeting. But the voice on the other end was different, serious, in a way that immediately set me on edge. "Mom, I need to tell you something about the wedding." Marcus said, his words careful and measured. "I don't think it's best if you come." At first I laughed, thinking he was joking. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Of course I'm coming to your wedding. I've been looking forward to it since you got engaged." The silence that followed lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice was cold and distant in a way I'd never heard before. "Hayley is feeling really stressed about the wedding planning, Mom. Her family is quite formal, and she's worried about managing everyone's expectations." I felt my stomach drop as the reality of his words sank in. "Marcus, are you actually telling me that I'm not invited to my own son's wedding? You know how you can be sometimes, Mom," he said, and each word felt like a physical blow. A little too direct, too outspoken. "Hayley thinks it would be better if we kept the guest list small and manageable." The tears started flowing before I could stop them. I thought about all those nights I'd worked double shifts to pay for his school clothes, all the times I'd gone without so he could have what he needed. I remembered selling my mother's jewelry to help pay for his college textbooks and sleeping on the couch for months so he could have the bigger bedroom. "Marcus," I whispered, my voice breaking, "do you remember what I sacrificed to give you the life you have now? Do you remember who was there for you when your father walked away?" "Mom, please don't make this harder than it is," he replied, and I could hear the finality in his tone. "This is about starting my new life with Hayley. I need to put her feelings first now." I tried one more time to reach the son I knew was still there somewhere. "Sweetheart, I just want to be there for the most important day of your life. I promise I'll be respectful and quiet. I won't cause any problems." "The decision is final," Marcus said firmly. "I'll call you after the honeymoon, and we can talk then. I have to go now. Hayley is waiting for me." The line went dead, leaving me sitting in my quiet kitchen, staring at the phone in disbelief. For the first time in 28 years of being Marcus's mother, I felt completely abandoned by my own child. The boy I'd raised to be kind and grateful had just excluded me from the most significant moment of his adult life. I sat there in the growing darkness, too stunned to even turn on the lights. The dinner I'd been preparing grew cold on the stove as I tried to process what had just happened. My son, my only child, the person I'd devoted my entire life to raising and supporting, had chosen a woman who had convinced him to reject his own mother. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for some sign that this wasn't really happening. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was exactly the kind of manipulation I'd been sensing from Hayley all along. She had systematically isolated Marcus from his family, and now she was completing the process by ensuring I wouldn't be present for their wedding day. After a sleepless night of tears and heartbreak, I woke up with a different feeling entirely. The sadness was still there, but it had been joined by something else: determination. I wasn't going to let my son make the biggest mistake of his life without at least trying to open his eyes to the truth. I started thinking about all the little details I'd noticed during the past 2 years, things that had bothered me, but that I'd dismissed as overthinking. I remembered how Hayley had mentioned someone named Derek during one of our conversations, describing him as a fitness friend who helped her stay motivated with her workouts. At the time, it had seemed innocent enough, but now I wondered if there was more to the story. I decided to do something I'd never done before: investigate someone online. I felt slightly guilty about it, but my motherly instincts were too strong to ignore. I opened my laptop and started searching for Hayley's social media profiles. It didn't take long to find her Facebook and Instagram accounts, which were public and full of photos from her seemingly perfect life. As I scrolled through her posts, I began to notice patterns that made my heart race. There were numerous photos of Hayley with a tall, muscular man who was tagged as Derek Morrison. The pictures showed them at coffee shops, hiking trails, and upscale restaurants. What struck me most was the intimacy of their body language and the timing of these posts. Many of the photos were taken during times when Hayley had told Marcus she was busy with work projects or girls' nights out. I cross-referenced the dates with my memory of conversations Marcus had shared, and the timeline didn't add up. While my son thought his fiancée was building her career, she was apparently spending intimate time with this Derek person. The comments on these photos were even more revealing. Friends were writing things like, "You two are so cute together," and "When are you going to make it official?" These weren't the kinds of comments you'd see on photos of just friends, and they certainly weren't appropriate for someone who was engaged to another man. I dug deeper and found Derek Morrison's profile. He was a personal trainer who owned a gym in Austin, and his photos confirmed what I was seeing on Hayley's account. They were clearly more than friends, and this relationship had been going on for months, possibly longer. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. I was going to drive to Austin and confirm what I suspected. It was a 4-hour drive from San Antonio, but I had to know for certain before taking any action. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made the drive to Austin. I'd found the address of Derek's gym through his business website, and I parked across the street where I could observe without being seen. I felt like a detective in a movie, but the situation was far too serious for me to find any humor in it. I didn't have to wait long. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Hayley's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. My heart was pounding as I watched her get out of her car and walk confidently into the gym. She was dressed in expensive workout clothes and moved with the familiarity of someone who'd been there many times before. What I witnessed next confirmed my worst fears and gave me the evidence I needed. About an hour later, Hayley emerged from the gym with Derek, and they were clearly not just trainer and client. They stood close together in the parking lot, talking intimately and laughing. Then Derek pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately, right there in broad daylight. I quickly took out my phone and captured several photos of their embrace. The images were clear and undeniable proof of Hayley's infidelity. As I watched them continue their affectionate goodbye, I felt sick to my stomach, not just because of what I was witnessing, but because I knew how devastated Marcus would be when he learned the truth. The drive back to San Antonio was the longest 4 hours of my life. I kept looking at the photos on my phone, feeling the weight of what I'd discovered. I now had concrete proof that my son's fiancée was cheating on him, but I also knew that revealing this information would destroy him emotionally and potentially damage our already strained relationship forever. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the photos spread out before me, wrestling with the most difficult decision I'd ever faced as a mother. Part of me wanted to call Marcus immediately and tell him everything I'd discovered, but another part of me worried that he wouldn't believe me, or worse, that he'd accuse me of trying to sabotage his happiness out of jealousy. I spent hours thinking about my sweet little boy and how he'd grown into a trusting, loyal man. Marcus had always been the type of person who saw the best in others, sometimes to his own detriment. His father had taken advantage of that trust when he left us, and now Hayley was doing the same thing in a different way. I remembered something my own mother had told me years ago when I was struggling with a difficult decision about protecting Marcus from a school bully. She'd said, "Sometimes loving someone means protecting them from their own blindness, even when they can't see the danger themselves." The more I thought about it, the more I realized that staying silent would be the real betrayal. If I let Marcus marry Hayley, knowing what I knew, I'd be complicit in the destruction of his future. He deserved to start his marriage with honesty and trust, not lies and deception. I began researching the wedding venue that Marcus had mentioned in passing, the Grand Texan Hotel in Austin. It was an upscale location that specialized in elegant weddings, and from their website, I could see it was exactly the kind of formal setting that would appeal to Hayley's pretentious standards. Even though I hadn't been invited, I decided I was going to attend that wedding. Not to cause a scene or create drama, but to ensure my son had all the information he needed before making a life-changing commitment. The thought of crashing my own son's wedding made me feel sick, but I couldn't live with myself if I stayed home and did nothing. I spent the next few days planning exactly how I would handle the situation. I chose a navy blue dress that was elegant but not attention-grabbing, and I practiced what I would say if I got the chance to speak. Most importantly, I decided I needed Derek's cooperation to make the revelation as clear and undeniable as possible. Finding Derek's contact information was easy through his gym's website. I called and scheduled what I described as a consultation for personal training services. When I arrived at his gym the following day, I was nervous, but determined to go through with my plan. Derek was exactly as he appeared in the photos, tall, athletic, and genuinely handsome. When I introduced myself as a friend of Hayley's family, he was friendly and welcoming, with no idea what I was really there to discuss. "I need to ask you something important about Hayley," I said carefully. "Are you aware that she's getting married this weekend?" The color drained from Derek's face immediately. "Married? What are you talking about? She told me she broke up with her boyfriend last month. We've been planning a weekend trip together after her family event this Saturday." My heart broke for this man as I watched him realize he'd been lied to just as thoroughly as my son had been. I explained the situation gently, but completely, showing him some of the photos I'd taken and explaining why I needed his help to prevent Hayley from ruining Marcus's life. Derek was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I'd told him. Finally, he looked up at me with determination in his eyes. "She's been lying to both of us," he said. "That man doesn't deserve to marry someone who's been cheating on him for months. What do you need me to do?" We spent the next hour developing a plan that would expose Hayley's deception in a way that would be impossible for her to deny or explain away. Derek agreed to come to the wedding with me, and together we would ensure that the truth came out before Marcus made the biggest mistake of his life. Saturday morning arrived with beautiful October weather, the kind of perfect day that makes people believe in happily ever after. I woke up early with my stomach in knots, knowing that by the end of the day, everything would be different for my son and for our family. I put on my navy dress and drove the familiar route to Austin, my hands shaking on the steering wheel as I rehearsed what I planned to say. The Grand Texan Hotel was even more impressive in person than it had appeared online. The entrance was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements in white and cream, and elegantly dressed guests were already arriving for the 4 o'clock ceremony. I felt completely out of place as I approached the building, knowing I was about to crash the most important day of my son's life. I had arranged to meet Derek in the hotel parking lot 30 minutes before the ceremony began. When I saw him approaching in a dark suit, I felt a mixture of gratitude and terror. This kind, decent man was about to help me do something that would devastate multiple people, but it was the right thing to do for everyone involved. "Are you ready for this?" Derek asked gently, and I could see he was just as nervous as I was. "No," I admitted, "but it has to be done. My son deserves to know the truth before he promises to love someone who's been lying to him for months." We entered the hotel separately, with Derek taking a seat in the back of the ceremony hall, while I found a spot where I could observe without being immediately noticed by Marcus or the wedding party. My heart nearly broke when I saw my handsome son standing at the altar in his black tuxedo, looking nervous but hopeful as he waited for his bride. The wedding guests were exactly what I'd expected from Hayley's social circle, impeccably dressed, sophisticated, and completely unfamiliar to me. I recognized a few of Marcus's college friends, but most of the attendees were clearly Hayley's family and associates. The absence of anyone from my side of the family was glaringly obvious and painful. When the wedding march began and Hayley appeared at the back of the aisle, I had to admit she looked stunning in her elaborate white gown. But I also noticed how she kept glancing around nervously, her eyes searching the crowd as if she was looking for someone specific. When her gaze found Derek sitting in the back row, her face went completely pale, and I saw her stumble slightly as she processed his unexpected presence. The ceremony proceeded normally for the first few minutes, with the officiant welcoming everyone and beginning the traditional wedding script. Marcus looked radiantly happy, completely unaware of the drama that was about to unfold around him. I felt sick, knowing I was about to destroy that happiness, but I reminded myself that a marriage built on lies would only cause him greater pain in the long run. When the officiant reached the part about whether anyone objected to the union, the entire hall fell into the customary respectful silence. That's when Derek stood up slowly and clearly said, "I object to this marriage." The gasps from the wedding guests were audible throughout the room. Marcus turned around with a confused expression, clearly having no idea who this man was or why he was disrupting the ceremony. Hayley looked like she was about to faint, gripping her bouquet so tightly that her knuckles were white. "This woman has been having an affair with me for the past 6 months. Derek continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "She told me she was single and available. I had no idea she was engaged to be married until yesterday." The chaos that erupted was immediate and overwhelming. Wedding guests began talking loudly among themselves, some standing up to get a better view of the drama unfolding. Marcus looked completely stunned, turning to stare at Hayley with an expression of utter disbelief. "That's not true," Hayley cried out desperately. "I don't even know this man. He's obviously confused or mentally unstable." That's when I stood up from my seat, my hands shaking, but my voice steady and clear. "But I know both of you," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And I have proof of what he's saying." The moment I stood up, Marcus's eyes found mine across the crowded ceremony hall. The shock on his face was complete and devastating. First, his fiancée had been accused of infidelity by a stranger, and now his uninvited mother had appeared at his wedding with claims of evidence. I could see him struggling to process what was happening as his perfect day crumbled around him. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of confused wedding guests. "What are you doing here? I told you not to come." My heart was breaking as I walked down the aisle toward my son, holding my phone with the photos I'd taken outside Derek's gym. Every step felt like a betrayal of the child I'd raised, but I knew that keeping silent would be the greater betrayal. "I'm here because I love you too much to let you make this mistake," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Hayley has been lying to you for months, and you deserve to know the truth before you promise to spend your life with her." Hayley was becoming increasingly frantic as I approached the altar. "This is insane," she shouted. "You can't just show up here and ruin my wedding with lies and accusations." "They're not lies," I said calmly, stopping directly in front of Marcus and holding out my phone. "These photos were taken 3 days ago outside Derek's gym. Look at them, son." With shaking hands, Marcus took my phone and began scrolling through the images. I watched his face change as he saw the clear evidence of Hayley's infidelity. The intimate embraces, the passionate kisses, the obvious comfort and familiarity between her and Derek. Each photo was a nail in the coffin of their relationship, and I could see his heart breaking with every image. "How long?" Marcus asked quietly, his eyes still fixed on the phone screen. "How long has this been going on, Hayley? Marcus, please." Hayley pleaded, tears streaming down her face and ruining her carefully applied makeup. "It didn't mean anything. He was just a trainer, just a friend. Those photos don't show what you think they show." Derek stepped forward from the back of the hall, his presence commanding immediate attention. "She's lying to you, just like she lied to me," he said directly to Marcus. "We've been dating for 6 months. She told me she broke up with her boyfriend and was free to start a new relationship." I had no idea that boyfriend was actually her fiancé. The wedding guests were now openly staring and whispering, with some beginning to leave the ceremony entirely. Hotel staff had appeared and were trying to maintain order, but the situation had gone far beyond anything they were equipped to handle. Marcus looked at Hayley with an expression I'd never seen before, complete disillusionment and growing anger. "Is this true?" he asked her directly. "Have you been seeing this man behind my back?" "It's not what you think," Hayley said desperately. "Your mother is trying to destroy us because she's jealous of our happiness. She never liked me, and now she's using this stranger to break us up." "I'm not a stranger," Derek said firmly. "My name is Derek Morrison. I own a gym here in Austin, and Hayley has been coming to see me 3 times a week for the past 6 months. She has a key to my apartment, and we were planning a vacation together next month. The details Derek provided were too specific and numerous for Hayley to refute. Other wedding guests began stepping forward with their own observations. Friends who had seen Hayley with Derek at restaurants, co-workers who had covered for her mysterious absences, family members who had wondered about her secretive phone calls. Marcus handed my phone back to me and turned to face Hayley directly. "How could you do this to me?" he asked, his voice breaking with pain. "How could you plan to marry me while you were in love with someone else?" "I'm not in love with him," Hayley protested, but her words sounded hollow and desperate even to her own ears. The officiant, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, stepped forward and quietly announced that the ceremony could not continue under these circumstances. Security personnel appeared and began gently encouraging guests to leave the ceremony hall, while hotel management tried to minimize the disruption to other events happening in the building. Marcus stood alone at the altar, still wearing his tuxedo, but looking completely lost and devastated. I approached him carefully, unsure whether he would welcome my comfort or blame me for destroying his wedding day. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," I said softly, "but I couldn't let you marry her knowing what I knew. You deserve so much better than someone who would lie to you and betray your trust." For a moment, Marcus just stared at me with tears in his eyes. Then, to my relief and surprise, he stepped forward and pulled me into a tight hug. "You were right about her," he whispered against my shoulder. "I should have listened to you from the beginning." The weeks following the cancelled wedding were some of the most difficult of both our lives, but they were also the beginning of healing for Marcus and me. After the immediate shock and humiliation wore off, Marcus made the decision to take some time away from Austin and the memories of his failed relationship. He temporarily moved back to San Antonio, staying in my spare bedroom while he sorted through his emotions and figured out his next steps. Those first few mornings were heartbreaking. I'd find Marcus sitting at my kitchen table before dawn, staring out the window with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. The confident, successful man he'd become had been replaced by someone who questioned everything he thought he knew about love and trust. "I can't believe I was so blind," he said during one of our early conversations. "All the signs were there, weren't they? The phone calls she wouldn't answer in front of me, the way she always had, somewhere else to be, how she never wanted to spend time with just you and me." I chose my words carefully, not wanting to make him feel worse about missing the red flags. "Hayley was very good at manipulation, sweetheart. She knew exactly how to make you feel like her behavior was normal, and that anyone who questioned it was being unreasonable." We spent hours talking through the past 2 years with Marcus, gradually recognizing all the ways Hayley had systematically isolated him from his family and friends. He realized that most of his old friendships had faded not because of natural distance, but because Hayley had consistently found reasons why he shouldn't maintain those relationships. Marcus also began seeing a therapist, which I encouraged wholeheartedly. He needed professional help to process not just the betrayal, but also to understand how he'd allowed someone to manipulate him so completely. The sessions were difficult, but necessary for his emotional recovery. During this healing period, Hayley made numerous attempts to contact Marcus, sending lengthy text messages and emails, explaining her actions and begging for forgiveness. She claimed that her relationship with Derek had been ending, that she'd been planning to break up with him before the wedding, and that her love for Marcus was genuine, despite her mistakes. Marcus showed me some of these messages, and I was struck by how they followed the classic pattern of emotional manipulation, taking partial responsibility while shifting blame, minimizing the severity of the betrayal, and promising change without acknowledging the fundamental dishonesty that had characterized their entire relationship. "She's still lying," Marcus said after reading one particularly lengthy email. "Even now, when she has nothing left to lose, she can't tell the complete truth about what she did." Derek, meanwhile, had reached out to thank me for saving him from what he now realized would have been a devastating situation. He'd discovered that Hayley had been telling him increasingly elaborate lies about her availability and her feelings for him. Learning about Marcus had helped him understand why their relationship had always felt secretive and compartmentalized. After about 6 weeks, Marcus felt ready to return to his job and his apartment in Austin. The time at home had helped restore our relationship to something even stronger than it had been before Hayley entered our lives. We were talking daily again, sharing meals regularly, and most importantly, Marcus had learned to trust my judgment and perspective in a way he hadn't since childhood. "I owe you an apology," he said the night before moving back to Austin. "You saw what she was doing to me long before I did, and instead of listening to you, I pushed you away. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, even when I made it clear I didn't want your help." The rebuilding process took time, but gradually Marcus began dating again. This time, however, he approached relationships with the wisdom that comes from experience. He introduced me to several women he dated casually, and I was impressed by how different his choices were from Hayley. These women were genuine, kind, and importantly, they welcomed, rather than resented, his close relationship with his family. About a year after the cancelled wedding, Marcus called me with excitement in his voice that I hadn't heard since before he'd met Hayley. He'd been seeing someone special named Sarah, a teacher who worked with special needs children. She was patient, compassionate, and had specifically asked Marcus when she could meet his mother. "She actually wants to learn your recipes." Marcus laughed during that phone call. "She says she can't properly love someone without understanding the family that shaped them." When I met Sarah, I knew immediately that this was different. She asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's childhood, listened to family stories with genuine interest, and treated me with the respect and warmth that Hayley had never shown. Most importantly, I could see that Marcus was completely himself around her, relaxed and confident in a way he'd never been with his former fiancée. The experience taught me that sometimes love requires making incredibly difficult choices. Standing up at that wedding and exposing Hayley's betrayal was one of the hardest things I'd ever done as a mother, but it was also one of the most important. I'd rather be seen as the villain who destroyed a wedding than stand silently by while my child committed his life to someone who didn't deserve his trust. Marcus is now happily married to Sarah, and I was not only invited to their wedding, but asked to help plan it. As I watched my son promise his life to someone who truly loves and values him, I felt a peace I'd never experienced before. Sometimes being a mother means being willing to be misunderstood, criticized, or even temporarily hated in order to protect your child from making a devastating mistake. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision to protect someone you love, even when they couldn't see the danger themselves, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Please give this video a like if my experience resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about the complicated choices we face in families and relationships. Share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes love looks like intervention rather than acceptance. Thank you for listening to my story with such patience and understanding. Remember that trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right, especially when it comes to the people you love most. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary ones, and protecting someone from their own blindness can be the greatest gift you give them. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.